Hey, good morning. We've just hosted our financial services breakfast briefing on the topic of climate change. And I'd like to take the time now just to talk to some of our speakers about the key takeaways from the discussion we had today. So Helena, a question on sustainable investing. Now, do you see that there will be continued increase in the amount of funding that goes into sustainable finance projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're already seeing a more than 30% increase in the past couple of years in global sustainable investments, and that is only going to continue with the growth in green bonds, sustainability, linked loans, and so on. And just these sustainable finance instruments are forecast to break through €1 trillion in the early 20s. And so it's both an exciting time but also a critical time for the financial sector to step up and step in to help us all transition to a more sustainable and a more low carbon economy.
Okay. In the corporate world, what challenges do you see that the corporates will face when it comes to measuring climate change risk?
Yeah, I think in my view, this can be seen from two perspectives. You have one inside-out perspectives, in terms of how the company is impacting climate change. Here we see that companies are fairly mature when it comes to measuring and disclosing their own emissions, direct and indirect emissions. But there are challenges when it comes to other indirect emissions stemming from the company's value chain. And these kind of emissions are fairly significant, given that they in some instances represent 90 to 95% of the total emissions. So there's a lot of work to be done, and my view is that companies are working with this, but it is challenging. The other perspective is the outside-in perspective, and that's in terms of how climate change may impact the company. Here we also see that companies are working on how to address this in a good way, but there are challenges when it comes to where to draw the line in terms of scenarios, consistency between companies when defining scenarios and assumptions for scenarios, given that different assumptions will give different results. And yet again, capturing impacts in the value chain, which may be relevant from a risk perspective for the company. That is, how will the supply chain be affected and how will our customers be affected?
Damien, so the focus of our conversation today was financial services. So what do you think financial services firms should be doing when it comes to managing climate change risk?
Personally, I think they need to do three things. The first thing they need to do is take the sort of ESG risks and incorporate it into their overall risk management framework. So that means having a product taxonomy that covers, and a risk taxonomy that covers all of these underlying risks, from the climate-related risk around physical transition and liability, but also the wider ESG around biodiversity loss, water loss, and incorporating that everything up to into the governance as well. The second thing they need to do is start capturing data and start trying to quantify the potential exposure and therefore the potential impact of these climate-related and ESG factors. So the first thing you do is that could be as simple as a greenness indicator on investments, or you start to look at carbon accounting around sort of greenhouse gas emissions and your exposure to those, and therefore the potential risk in relation to those factors. Or you then go a bit further and try and incorporate it into credit portfolio models to create a more holistic view. And then the final thing you need to do is to make it real. And the best way to make it real is to do a stress test. So you take the stress test from Bank of France, the PRA, or the Dutch regulator, and see how it impacts your portfolio. And hopefully if you do all those three things, you're starting to collect data, you're starting to better understand your portfolio, you know the potential impact, you can then disclose it, and you can then incorporate it into everything you do.